I'd like to call the May 16th meeting of the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors to order. Ms. Steele, will you call the roll?
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith will not be with us tonight. Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Hedrick?
Here.
And Mr. Bazzani?
Here.
Would you join me in the invocation and pledge allegiance by Mr. Ashley Chriscoe?
Dear God, as we gather in this place, may you shower your blessings upon each of us and prepare our hearts for the things that will be discussed. Lord, help us be a blessing in the way we speak and act, and let everything we discuss here be in alignment with your word. And may we speak with humility when presenting our ideas. Help us to admit our mistakes and be willing to act upon the solutions people give us. May your glory and peace fill this meeting. In Jesus' name we believe and pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is approval of the minutes. There are none. Adoption of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Matters presented by the board. Mr. Chriscoe.
Ms. Steele, do you care if I steal some of your thunder from the meeting last week that you guys had?
Have at it. There'll be less I have to say.
It's a matter presented by the board, and in our other meetings, we always have commission reports. So I just wanted to make mention that we have started some discussions as far with other localities in our immediate region, with the Middle Peninsula part of it anyway, about doing some regional reassessment. That first meeting has taken place. There was one locality not there. Ms. Steele and Mr. Thomas were engaged, and they're going to continue those conversations so that we can maybe look at a process that's better for all of our surrounding localities. Which I think we're probably the only one that's in-house and the only one that does it in-house, and these folks are hiring outside companies and are not getting the best results. So we are looking at possibly doing that if it works out, but just wanted to make that mention. And this is something Ms. Steele and I talked about, probably 6 months ago. And we finally got it to the Planning District Commission, and they finally got them on the docket to talk about it. So we're trying to move forward and see if we can make things better for the region.
Anyone else? Citizen comment period. Oh, County Administrator, I'm sorry.
He's really trying to make sure you don't talk to me, Carol.
Well, you all have heard this, but for the public's sake, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of a lot of different good news. One, we received the grant to move forward on the Abingdon dock replacement with a Virginia Port Authority grant for $221,788, in addition to be able to hold over our funds from this year. So that's good news. Also, the tourism department received a grant for marketing for $20,000 to help market our area, which is great news. George Baines, the deputy county administrator, was awarded the Julian F. Hurst Award of Duty and Service by the Hampton Roads chapter of the American Society of Public Administration. And we appreciate his peer nomination from the other deputy, which is really kind and nice to recognize when you see how hard someone that you work with is performing. I also want to recognize a youngster out there. Oh, very good. One of our younger staff, Robert Kelly, who is the museum's coordinator, he was just named to the ODU Alumni 40 Under 40. So that's a good group to stay in membership of. And that is for his achievements and service. So big classes at ODU to be recognized as one of those 40. And then the last thing I had was just to give the board members a heads up that we will be going back, hopefully, to strategic planning and discussing that. So you've received some information, and we'll be working on that at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move to citizen comment period. Citizens like to come up and talk, we'll give you 10 minutes. Any emails, calls? All right. We'll move to the work session agenda, a request for appropriations for school security improvements. Before you come up, is this your last one with us? Then 2 minutes.
Well, first, let me say good evening to all of you all, Mr. Hutson, Ms. Chriscoe, members of the board, Ms. Steele, Ms. Cronin, Mr. Wilmot, and those who are assembled and those who may be watching. We always thank you for the opportunity to come and present to you regarding needs for the school division, and so we want to thank you for giving us the opportunity this evening. And so what we have before you this evening is a request for an appropriation to help us move towards enhancing security measures. As we all see around the country, we all know there are many, I would say, precautions that are needed in this day and time to help keep, students and staff safe at all times. And I think, it was exacerbated, I think, by what we saw in Newport News several months ago with the student, being involved in the shooting of a staff member at the elementary school. And I see where school divisions are looking to find ways to enhance security. And we, as a leadership team and as a division, and also in communication with Ms. Steele, wanted to take a look at how we can provide, safety enhancements, but do it in a layered approach and do it in a strategic approach, because we feel that sometimes going right out and just doing may not be the best approach in the long run. So we want to make sure that we, keep our students and staff safe, but make sure that we do our appropriate research to make sure that we come to you with things that can be considered for implementation. And so what we have before you this evening, and I'll bring up Mr. Hartley and our representative from Mid-Atlantic, is a request to start that process with looking at buzzer systems on all of our doors throughout our schools, because we know that, that's a framework that allows us to be immediately notified when we have a situation where someone may enter our building. Also, we have to always continue to reinforce with staff and students to keep doors locked at all times, not propping doors open to allow outside access to our buildings, and just continuously, I would say, reinforcing good habits and protocols in addition to security measures, because you can have all the security, but if you don't have appropriate implementation of the security, then it renders itself useless. So before you this evening, we want to talk a little bit about what we're planning and what we also, from the request, would ask you to consider the earmark for later security measures, because what we want to do is, we've seen a lot of things that relates to different types of weapons detection systems and metal detectors and all of these things, but we said before we go down that road, we want to investigate it, look at the companies, come and have a demonstration, let our school board see it, let the county board of supervisors see it, the county administrator, so everybody has a good feel for if there is an implementation that we'd like to utilize funding for, everybody feels is this the right way to go. So we're going to start this evening with the first phase of that, and I'll bring up Mr. Hartley at this point in time, and we'll discuss about what we want to do, and hopefully you'll receive that favorably so we can start this process to continue to keep our students and our staff safe in our buildings. All right, Mr. Hartley.
All right, good evening. If you will recall, we touched briefly, at least on a preliminary basis, about kind of a two-pronged system, talking about weapons detection as well as this door notification system. We've kind of researched both approaches pretty well, in my opinion, and I will do some introductions in here in just a moment. Regardless of what we do with some sort of, entry system, we feel like the door notification system is vitally important. It does so much more, and it also gives us an opportunity to kind of upgrade some of our other security features, like our security panels in every building, and have some uniformity across the division in what we do. So where we are now and what this number and what the, packet has been put together by Mid-Atlantic allows us to program options, allows us to integrate our swipe badges. We can tie into our alarm system. We can program our doors. So we don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops and figure out a bunch of what ifs. For example, like fire drills. We know we can shut the system down for fire drills and, somehow at some point connect it to our fire panel. So we don't have a bunch of door alarms going off when we're doing a drill we have to do once a month. So things like that. So I will say, back to the weapons detection systems, we're still doing some research. There's several systems out there. I think we made reference to the Evolve system at our joint session, and we're still looking at that system as well. We are trying to get a demonstration set up, which we'll send an invitation out to, but we're somewhere in the window of May 30th to June 1st. But once we know for sure, we'll make sure that we send the invitation out. We've already talked to law enforcement about coming and participating as well. So with that said, I will invite from the school division, Jim Maloney and Noah Hendricks. They're from our IT department, and as well Mike Hankey from Mid-Atlantic, who's been very responsive to our questions, and every time he puts together a quote, we're like, hey, can you add this or take this off? And so he's been very responsive, but certainly they can answer any specific questions about it or be more articulate than me about any questions you may have pertaining to the door contacts, notification systems. And again, the one thing I left off, along with it sending an electronic notification to somebody we designated, also ties in with our alarm company, but we also have a visual and audible notifier on the door as well. So when a door opens, there's an alarm, there's a light that flashes, there's a notification that's sent, and if the door is open for a significant period of time, then the company will start making phone calls.
Mr. Bazzani.
Real quick, Mr. Harley.
Yes, sir.
So when the system is installed, that means no students can exit or open the doors during the school day? Or do you have it so that someone guards the door as the students go out for some whatever extracurricular activity?
So what we want to do is designate very specific doors for entry points. We can maybe be a little more expansive with an upgrade for exit points, but we don't want, in general, students opening doors for anybody. That's our whole purpose of funneling into one or two entrances into the building. And we're going to have to change some behaviors. It's going to be student behavior. It's going to be adult behavior. And some people won't necessarily appreciate it at first, but it's all about safety. But to answer your final question, for egress purposes and for fire egress purposes, they have to be able to open those doors. We will put signage on the doors to say they're for emergency exit only.
And my last question is Mid-Atlantic the only company that you bid that responded, or how's that working? How does that?
As far as getting different quotes, we've not put out RFP. We have a cooperative contract, so we've been able to get some numbers.
Oh, so you have not put the RFP out yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any more? Dr. Orth.
So this system will be installed on all the doors in all the schools?
All exterior doors.
Exterior doors?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that alarm is set, so as soon as the students all arrive, then they're set so that, the students enter and that's it, right? So you're programming this so that it allows for the students to enter certain points, but there'll be doors that will always be closed, correct? So they can't come in any other way?
Correct. So,
So
in the absence of any detection system that we're investigating now, we still want to minimize the number of doors that people are coming in. With those systems, they're come with a pretty hefty price tag, so we're going to be somewhat limited in the number of doors we put those systems in. But as far as all the other doors, our intent is to keep them closed.
So it's all exterior?
All exterior doors.
Ms. Stevens.
Just to clarify, a cooperative contract means it's already been bid by another locality. So as long as we use the same agreements and the same pricing structure, we can avoid the hassle of having to go do our own bid. You can always do an additional one, but that's one of the advantages of when Newport News or Hampton or other larger localities do these bids, that we don't have to go right behind them and repeat them.
So they're qualified bidders then, right?
Yes, they are.
Qualified bidders list.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Mr. Chriscoe.
And this does include T.C. Walker Education Center as well as the schools, correct?
Yes, sir, and transportation.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions?
Make a motion.
Okay, there's two resolutions. The first one on page 18 is for the $379,482 for the doors.
Make a motion that we accept, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Ms. Steele, will you pull the board?
Dr. Orth?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
The second resolution on page 19 is for the, and this money was coming out of the additional 700,000. The unappropriated, yes, was for the remaining $320,518 to be earmarked for future safety measures and move it to fiscal year 2024.
Two quick questions on that before we do anything. One, do we want to earmark it all the way as a security improvement, or do we want to have it for school improvements in case there's something that comes up that we need to address, and then instead of having to come back to change it from security to a school improvement, I think a school improvement the security would fall underneath of it. I mean, I don't want to pigeonhole us if all of a sudden we do the doors and all of a sudden there's, I don't know what it would be, but there's some other thing that we have to do.
Yeah, I think Mr. Chriscoe raises an interesting question because there are always grant monies coming available. We don't know where the state may stand in other issues. So perhaps something that might be more of an umbrella statement that allows the schools the opportunity to adjust depending on where the money comes from.
I think it would just be a matter of taking the word security out of it, because what if all of a sudden we have the primaries on June 20th and then the legislators pass their budget and they go, we're going to start a new grant system and we can use this money and leverage it as a grant. Just a thought.
It makes sense. I mean, what we were trying to do is to just make sure that we had resources, so, thank you. It makes sense to do it that way. We wanted to make sure that we had the resources earmarked so that when we start to explore these systems, that we would have an ability to have a funding source for that. However, as you said, there are needs that do come up. So if you don't want to put the specificity necessarily for security only, or maybe if the resolution is security and or other needs, that would come up. I think I'd like that because it still gives us the ability to hit security if it's needed. But if it's something else that comes up, as you said, that's an emergency or an immediate need, then we would want to be able to utilize it for that as well.
Okay. Mr. Wilmot?
Yes, sir.
The resolution we just passed on page 18 has school security improvements in it. That's right. But if you go to the second line, it's reserved for future school security improvements. Do we need to change that resolution? I mean, to modify it that we've already voted on and approved?
One problem is once you appropriate monies to the school system, you're done. So you can't unappropriate them. So.
Well, I'm going back to the money we just appropriated, the resolution on page 18.
Yes.
The second line. Do we need to change the second line?
I think Ms. Cronin just whispered a key answer, that even if you appropriated, that's for this fiscal year, so that could be correct. The next resolution is for next fiscal year, so you can change its purpose.
That makes sense.
But we just made,
For FY '23, and if they were gonna spend money today,
then it would have to be for security.
right.
Okay.
But they're not going to, because you're gonna take it
Okay.
right back from them and give them to them again for next year.
Thank you.
So where would you like, Ms. Lucas, I'm gonna ask you, what, for the resolution on page 19, where do you want that to go, or Ms.?
Right.
It would go into the capital improvement fund, no matter whether it's security or the general,
So we're gonna transfer it from our capital fund to your capital fund?
it's
school-
all kind of the same, but yes.
School capital funds.
It's just earmarked for.
Mr. Wilmot?
That's really the way it should be. because you only have two options as a Board of Supervisors. It's either lump fund sum them, or do it by categories. So I think it's probably good that you just, yes,
Capital.
appropriate.
So the resolution on page 19, on the first line, instead of school security improvements, will be capital funds, school capital funds.
Mr. Chair, that's where I have an issue, because I don't like to earmark anything unless the schools have a proposal for that money. So if they come up with another security proposal, then we allocate that money then, but just to give them a blank check of, here's $300,000 and go spend it, that's a little bit too loose for me. I'm not comfortable with that.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Are we able to, if Mr. Bazzani has that feeling, which is, at times can be understandable, but could we encumber that on our side for, put it in its own designated fund on the county side for school improvement? Is that a possibility? I mean, everybody has their own budget item. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't think it really matters.
It's, I understand where Mr. Bazzani's coming from too, but it's only $320,000 and it would be restricted to capital. So it would not affect their operating budget at all. They would have to spend it on capital, which that right there cuts out so many possibilities of use.
That's therein is my problem, because, they can,
But this is also money that we appropriated in our budget last year.
Yep.
We never,
This year.
or this year, sorry. We just passed the budget for next year. I'm already on next year. But it's money that we already appropriated. We just never allocated this pool of money to them. And I would dare say, more than likely, when we get to October, they're gonna give us some more back anyway, because that's what they always do. So for me, I don't have the heartburn, because we never allocated this money during this budget cycle anyway.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, just one more comment. I think the security needs go beyond this $300,000. And I know that the governor announced a new grant end of last week. And depending upon how we score, they may get another $300,000. It easily can all be spent on security, because it is an expensive
well,
venture.
if that is true, then why let's just hold off until we see what the state does. And then at that point in time, we move the money over. I mean, I don't like to just throw the money over the fence and they'll figure out some capital, expenditure that they suddenly come up with. I'd like to see some plans on what they're proposing to buy.
Dr. Orth.
Yeah, I understand. I think we all understand your concerns, Ms. Bazzani. But they've also come to us knowing that we're going to be looking at enhanced features for weapon detection. It's going to happen. And more than likely, they're going to have to rely on this fund. So I don't really have any problem with that, because we know it's going to happen next fiscal year.
Well, then leave the wording as it is then.
I mean, I don't have any problem with that at all, because we know that security is a major issue and high priority item for this board.
I agree. I just don't want just capital fund and just throw it over. I like to, if it's earmarked, let's earmark it for security. They may have another need that comes up for security. And maybe the doors may be more expensive, or there's a requirement that, to enhance the doors in some way, or some other security system they need.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we just may be overthinking this. We've approved the the appropriation for the doors. We've got the clear intent from the school system that they want to use this for a weapons detection system, but they understandably are being cautious and diligent about finding the right weapons detection system. We know that, I believe there's a consensus that we want to use this money for that purpose, so I feel comfortable with the resolution as it's drafted.
Including the word security? Okay.
Yes.
I'm good.
Would somebody like to make a motion? All right, Ms. Steele, will you, hold on, pull the board.
Mr. Hutson.
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Dr. Orth. Motion carries.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll see you next month. He's got a haircut like he's got a job interview or something.
He knew he was going to be on TV. I'm going to save my comments for you next month.
That's Friday. That's next Friday. Okay. Next item is a request for appropriations for the joint Board of Supervisors, Economic Development Authority, Small Business Incentive Grant Program. Ms. Spring.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors. As you know, for the last 7 years, this has been a very successful program, and year-to-date, this year, we have awarded 46 grants from the program, totaling over $81,000, and with private investments of $4.8 million. So now the program needs to be replenished before the next fiscal year starts. The EDA has requested an appropriation of $25,000 from the county with a match of $25,000 from the EDA.
Any questions for Ms. Spring? Mr. Hedrick?
Make the motion to approve the resolution on page 25.
Second.
Ms. Steele?
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth?
She started with
Thank you all. Thank
Hey,
you.
any good news on the horizon that you can share with us? Or is it too early to tell?
Can we ask if a certain business is coming in?
You can ask.
Can you dispel I heard a rumor that Panera Bread is coming to Gloucester County?
It would be. I can tell you that the Tallheimer with Fox Mill Center has been talking to Panera Bread probably as long as I've had this job.
So, no.
But no, it would be fantastic. We do have a new company that's coming into Fox Mill Center that's Tech Solutions. And they work on cell phones, iPads, and Xboxes. And this is their 3rd location. So that'll be nice.
But no recent movement on Panera Bread.
Soon,
I love that place.
soon as we hear something, I'll share it with all of you.
By the way, just that, I know Mr. Bazzani brought up an interesting component to trying to get the county out there, and I think you presented some of, what was that before, that talks about the county that you can use to spread the word? Remember, what was it you talked about? You shared with us.
I'm drawing a blank, sorry.
No, I just remembered. Well, no, I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out how to, really make the county sellable to businesses, because we know how important that is to this county. Obviously, this board is very business friendly, and anything we can do to get the word out, which I know you do.
Well, we do advertising on a national level for the business park, and we're having an ad design now for the Page property. So that'll give you great exposure. That'll be the 28 acres. And also, I'm making a lot of cold calls.
That's what I was talking about.
I'm making a lot of cold calls next week at the International Council of Shopping Centers.
Well, and the other thing too is, we have the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission as a regional entity, and unfortunately, our Economic Development Authority that you and I helped get going, we actually just received notification, I think right before the last meeting, that we are out of IRS jail. So we are back to being a functioning organization. So we'll be setting up a meeting once I can get the other localities to tell me who their new designee is, because it's been so long. Some of the folks that were on that commission with me are no longer serving their localities. So we're going to get that re-implemented. So that'll be another VEDP tool that we have that will, since we're now a regional organization again, that will be able to have a better seat at the table for some of these things.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next item is a request for golf cart use in Riverwatch Homeowners Association.
And, that's right. Good evening, Mr. Hutson, Mr. Chriscoe, and members of the board. As you can see in your packet, we've had another community come to us and ask about a golf cart. So this one is up in the northern part of the county. It's Riverwatch. In doing it, the HOA went out and polled all the people in the community. It's in your packet. Only about 36 homes are built out of the 80-some lots in there. But of the people that were in there, the majority of the ones that did reply back, 36 did want to have that designation. We've done it for a couple others. Dunstan Hall was the last one we did a year or so ago. I'm just here tonight to see if y'all want to move ahead with this. If I get kind of a head nod from y'all, we'll go ahead and move towards doing it. I'll work with Mr. Wilmot to get the right ordinance we've got to. You know, they've got requirements inside the neighborhood, has to be less than 25 miles an hour. We get the sheriff involved on which roads he feels are appropriate, so they're not out on the main roads. And then they gotta have signage inside their community that lets them know that the golf carts are on the roads also.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to voice my support for this. I had the pleasure of attending the HOA meeting for Riverwatch last week. Riverwatch is in the Petsworth district. They had a big turnout. They are, all of the residents there were in favor of this. If you've been out to Riverwatch, it has, unlike many subdivisions, has very wide roads, very well planned. And as Mr. Baines mentioned, the local code has lots of safety restrictions. You have to have a valid driver's license, you have to have insurance, you have to follow the rules of the road. So just on behalf of those residents, I would support this.
If I get a head nod from y'all, I'll move forward. One other thing, and it was just because I've gotten a couple emails in, but with, I was going to tell our county administrator, but I didn't get to her before this meeting. This week, VDM has got designated as Hurricane Preparedness Week, even though it doesn't start till June 1st. And I got a question about our hazard mitigation program. We've got a third-party firm that works with us called Witt O'Brien, and in doing it, we've put one house out. It was over the cost of what we have. We're working with VDM to see if we can't still get that house done. It was a reconstruction, and in the next couple of weeks, we'll be bidding out 5 homes. We've got Ms. Joyce back, who's helped us with those before. She's very comfortable, and we've got 5 homes out that may go out for bid at one time to raise all of them. So we are active in that program. We've had a couple withdraw because how old the homes were was a family member who's now moved on, so that the kids don't want to try to raise the house and such. So we've had, I think, 2, maybe 3 withdraw, but out of the program, it's moving forward. We didn't look for a grant this year because we had so many in the queue, and the last time they went out for bid about 16 months ago, you know, the cost of construction at that time, none of them met what we had for grants. We're hoping this time we'll get better cost on it. But this lets you know, hurricane season coming, we're trying to raise those houses down there while we're up here. All right?
Ms. Steele.
There's a reference to a public hearing, and I know sometimes we don't have to do a
Oh,
public
I'm sorry,
hearing.
you're
We have to do public notice, and I'm not sure which this falls in.
Yeah, this one, Ted is the one who has explained it to us before, but this one, you've got to at least do a public notice, but it doesn't have to have a public hearing. It's up to y'all again on what you would like to do with that.
I think it should be a public notice, simply because it's going to be confined entirely into one neighborhood.
Okay. That good? Thank y'all.
All right, next item is long-range planning for future capital needs. Ms. Steele.
Well, I hope y'all have had some time to look through and further digest the information that Davenport provided. In addition to collapsing into the board packet, I think what are most essential pages, also included the summary page from the PowerPoint of how I had kind of come up with the general figure, and included copies of the capital improvement projects that you all might want to consider for long-term borrowing if you go that route. So tonight, I think it's up to you all to discuss. I'm looking for if there are other scenarios or other information that you would like Davenport to provide. If you would like to hear more information from the fire department or other requesters for long-term projects. And I would just end with reminding that the timeline, if you're not ready tonight to make some decisions or however, or go forward a certain direction, we just have to keep in mind the August deadline for being able to be on the November ballot if you choose to do that.
Gentlemen?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bazzani.
I'm not in favor of putting water and sewer down Woodville Park. It's going to enrich all the other property owners around it. If they want to develop that property, they should go ahead and pay for the water and sewer to come down that way, but I don't want the taxpayer to pay for that.
Ms. Steele.
If I can clarify, the adjusted price with the total that's proposed in there for Woodville has several different changes, and that's why if you add up the CIPs, it doesn't add up, it adds up to a much greater amount. that is only to run water and sewer to Woodville without the ability to hook on. So the board can restrict it.
If you're anywhere near those properties, you can pay the extra footage to get those.
Mr.
to hook
Bazzani,
on.
this was the property, remember when we had our retreat, they talked about $1 million a mile versus the other one was, and I can't remember numbers, $4 million a mile. This was one that was just to utilize Point Woodville to 17.
It's a high-pressure low-pressure system that would go through.
You can't expand to it.
Right.
The capacity would not be there for expansion.
Can it be converted later on into a force system?
If someone wants to spend that money, if someone wants to come in there, if those people that own that property or whoever they sell it to want to come in there and spend probably at that point in time, the $4 million a mile to make that sustainable for multiple homes on water and multiple homes on sewer, then they could do that. Because that was our concern, but they had set it up so that we were going to run it to the capacity for Woodville and whatever Woodville would generate and nothing more.
Does Woodville have enough capacity of people visiting that they need water and sewer down there?
Well, since there is no on-site restroom facility and probably not the ability to put a septic system out there, then yeah, there is enough, because everything right now is pump and haul. We're putting it into a porta-john and it's getting picked up weekly, whatever the case may be.
Mr. Bazzani, if I can add a little, in our capital projects, if you look through them, it's always been planned to have some type of bathrooms down there besides porta potties. And because that soil down there won't take a normal septic system, we're looking at what we can do. So this is one of the latest ones. They're using this up in Middlesex. It's a low pressure system so that you only push what you actually have from that facility. You don't build it, so it's a giant interceptor main for other people to tie into. In doing it, I was at a meeting with the PDC when they talked to Hampton Roads HRSD about these. So in doing it, it really is just to help us get the park to the point where when we have the capacities out there, we've got real facilities versus these porta potties. And that's all we have right now, are
Right,
porta
but is there
potties.
enough demand for the park to justify?
Yes, sir. As we do the 5 fields that we just did, in the proposal we have in here is just kind of a hodgepodge of the things that are out there. We're talking about lighting for the rest of the fields, a facility like Wickham Lodge that would have a meeting area and offices for some of the park staff. It's going to need a bathroom. We already have a shed down there that they keep all the equipment in. There's no restrooms there either. So we'd be able to have bathrooms for our staff, bathrooms for the people there for any events, and bathrooms for the people who are using the sports fields.
Because isn't Baystars building their own facility?
They have their own facility, but they do the same thing. They've got porta potties down there too, so they don't have sewer
But I'm
there.
just saying that affects the demand for the facility.
We have 2 football leagues and a soccer league that all like to use those. Those would be the only lit fields in the county. So, in the winters or even in the summers later in the evening, we may have even, who knows, lacrosse out there or some other people that would want to use them once the fields are built and are lit. We may have
so
others.
these are 6 football fields right here?
5.
They are
5 entire football fields.
Well,
If
soccer
I
and 5.
can, because I want to jump into this, I helped plan these.
I don't see the demand.
So, Mr. Bazzani, I think let me just clarify on the fields. Those are athletic fields. They have been used for lacrosse, they've been used for soccer, they've been used for football. They've also been used for special events of many different types. The numbers that are in, and maybe Mr. Wright can even look it up and pass you a note later on, but the numbers that are in your monthly report of how many people are using Woodville, we're talking thousands of people, tens of thousands per year, and with no facilities. And we're actually, by being open year-round, we're in violation of the health department. So if every single Baystar person moved away, this is still a extremely viable and popular park. And for those...
Then may I interrupt and just
Yes, sir.
kindly interrupt and just say, well, then let's wait to see what the demand is after Baystars has created their fields, and let's see what the demand will be at post-Baystars facility.
Baystars has been working on their facility across from the high school for at least almost a decade now. I don't know if they're going to open them for any fields. It's basically an old sand pit that they're doing reclamation on. So as they do reclamation, they create a field at a time. So they do have a place down there, but I don't know of any imminent moving of them from Woodville. I think they're still going to use Woodville as their home fields for games for quite some time.
I would strongly suggest that board members who aren't as familiar as they'd like to be with that park to go down there and look at the number of people who are playing. And whether a child is playing football or soccer or whatever, I'm just happy they're out playing. But we do have a lot of people who walk there for exercise daily. We have cyclists who come in and cycle. We have the master naturalists, the master gardeners. We have the Community Services Board has raised vegetable beds there. So there's a lot of activity. We've had dog lessons or dog activity.
We had
We've
a touch of
astrology, or astronomy, not astrology.
We had Touch a Truck, and we even one year
Yeah.
had to have the Virginia Symphony down there because of issues we had here, so we had it down there at Woodville. So it's just the progression of that park as it grows. These restrooms are kind of the next step that we really need to look at doing because of the use there.
And I'm not void to the criticism, the notes that I sent out to you all from the citizen comments, and there have been some that have been made in these meetings that people talk about, don't spend any more money on Woodville, or they don't like Woodville. I think there's just some misconceptions. I know I've never heard that negativity towards Beaver Dam, and I think it's because of familiarity. And so I just, the board can do, and that's one specific project within long-term borrowing, which, again, y'all can look at what, if you want to borrow long-term, you can decide which ones and how.
Ms. Steele, can you get Ms. Lake to send us a schedule of when people play, and we'll let the Board of Supervisors know the schedule. They can go down and take a look and see how many people use that park on a weekend. And I've driven through several times during the week just to see what's going on. I'm always seeing people there.
Yeah,
So, but it might be good.
Very popular too.
Yeah, it might be really good for us, those that don't see how it's used, to go down there on a weekend when there are just lots of people.
You don't have to wait till the weekend.
Right,
Just during the week.
weeknights.
Well, yeah, I mean, why not give us a schedule, put it out, and, if they're playing now, let people from the board go there and actually look and see and talk to the people there. It might be good.
Right.
Okay, fair enough.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes, having gone through these pages that define what this borrowing may be about, and trying to, I've been down, let me back up a minute. I've been down to Woodville any number of times, and every time I've been down there, I've seen lots of people playing soccer, adult soccer competitions between just make-up teams. It's used almost every time I've been down there with lots of people. But I think what we're trying to get at here is, are we going to borrow money to do these long-term projects, or aren't we going to borrow money? And we've got three options, and we've got to decide on the modified needs list. We got to find out if there are other things that we want to add to it, or perhaps delete some of these in their entirety. So I'd like to sort of stay on that conversation for a while. Thank you.
Yes, my biggest concern in looking at all of this currently is the deficit that we run in the first 4 to 6 to 7 or 8 years with the debt service that comes with this type of borrowing. Is it possible for Davenport to provide us with our total amount that we can borrow without running into that deficit that we see in column L for all the different scenarios that have been presented to us? Because I don't want to put an option out there for our folks to make a decision on where the unintended consequence is we borrowed this money, there's a tax rate increase involved with it, and then, oh shoot, there's also another tax rate increase involved with it because there's a deficit that we're running. And I would like to know what our capacity is prior to deciding which project is eliminated or which projects we want to include.
I can definitely find that out in the conversations we've had with them. I know that two options that they would probably look at right away is, one, holding off on borrowing by multiple years, because the reason there's a deficit is because of the way we're paying off current debt. So that's one option. The second option would be to infuse with fund balance, other, revenue sources that would take care of that. So those are two things right away. And a third one would be to postpone some of the projects. We've already built in postponing Body Tot because that was listed as year 5. So if we push back certain projects, like say, for example, you wanted to move forward with the fire department, because that's going to generate revenue to help, not revenue, but the offset of the property sale. So if you moved forward with that, just that on year 1, and then year 2 went with something else. So that, we can have them look at a couple of different ways of staggering the borrowing.
That's fine. I mean, we don't see that here, and all I see is this deficit. I look over here on column L, and I see numbers in a parentheses, and that causes me heartburn as a board member.
It might be good, again, now that we've had some time to take all these numbers and now maybe have the guy from Gavin, Mr. Coles, right, come in again, and we can really grill him with some of the questions that are coming out now, because, the clock is ticking to when we've got to decide about a referendum and what that referendum would include. And there's obviously, some questions that each board member has had regarding each of these projects. But again, it's an opportunity that we have to do some things that have been talked about for a long time. So I think that, I wouldn't mind having him come again and discuss this so we can make some decisions.
And Ms. Steele, if we're gonna bring Mr. Cole back, which I think is the best thing to do, let's let him look at, in roughly, what was it, $30 million that you have just as a target. No, but we don't have it as putting items off and playing where, moving Botetourt to 4 years out, moving the different things out. So where the
How to
borrowing
do
would
30
be.
million without having any parentheses.
But
Okay.
where the funding would be and how that would work.
So I will make arrangements for him to come, and what I'd like to do, because I told him we would talk after this meeting, I'd like to go ahead and give him some of these scenarios in case he wants to go ahead and send you, because again, at the time factor, in that way you can see that, and then that might generate more questions. And he's very responsive.
That would be more helpful.
Okay.
Just move it to Mr. Gibson.
I would support that, and just to make sure that we have an understanding under that framework, I think that's a good idea. I did have a couple of questions about your modified needs list and the draft list of projects. The numbers seemed lower than I recall, particularly the fire station at 7.1, and I just want to make sure I understand why they were lower.
That is looking at the 2.9 million coming in from the sales and the so you add 3.9 million, and so that's the net that we were looking at. So I think that was my figuring. It might be that because it's kind of like you got to put it on the plus side and the minus side, that they're going to put it back in, and so you really might borrow 33 point whatever to pay. But I just wanted you to know how much county involvement.
That's 4.4. Because that's why it's net county expense. Correct?
Right, we would borrow the full amount. So actually, the 29 needs to be taken up. We would borrow the full amount, but we would have the revenue to repay, and that would factor into the overall schematic.
If you do it that way, though, wouldn't that change in item L in all the scenarios where we have the
I think he's actually,
surplus?
I think he
Because-
did the full figures, I believe.
If you look on any of those sheets, on year number 2027, he puts the money back in. So you look at any of your scenarios, he puts the money back in after the sales of the property.
Right, column F shows the 1.5, the 500 is the money that we've got for fund balance to go to the radios, and the 1 million
But
is,
it's still 4.4.
yes, because of the 500,000
When you add the two
extra
together,
that doesn't have to do anything with on this modified needs list. that has to do with capital improvement budget already passed.
Okay, Mr. Gibson.
Yeah, thank you. On the sports complex at the high school, I didn't see listed renovation of the baseball and softball fields. Was that included, or was that removed from the proposal?
So I went with directly what they did, what they proposed, and I think this is where we would probably benefit by having them also provide some additional information. Because I was looking, and I had to go back through it. I knew that they had planned on a synthetic field, but for some reason I was thinking that was going to be the field hockey field, and then when I reread it, it was like the football field would be synthetic. So I think we need to have a little bit more explanation. In fact, what I'll try to do is, again, for timeliness, is get that sent out to you by email, if that works. Yes, which fields and.
So are we good with,
And if I may, really quickly, gentlemen, Mr. Bazzani, to answer your question about Woodville utilization, Mrs. Legg actually sent me, they have a car counter at Woodville. So FY '22, obviously, there were still some closures, but 26,947 vehicles. So assuming conservatively 2 people per vehicle, if someone's taking their kiddo for a league, you're looking at roughly 53,000 individuals. For FY '23, it's already been 39,859 vehicles.
That's good empirical data, okay.
you're welcome. Okay, so, right, any more, Mr. Gibson? That was it. So we're going to get Mr. Cole to give us, at the 29 million, where it would be, breaking it down to spreading out the funding. Mr.
Mr. Chair, so given that, remember we only have one meeting in June, one in July. So given the timeline, we need to know when we need to make the final decision regarding the referendum, correct?
And I would assume that would be that July 6th meeting.
The drop dead
But I'll-
date.
Our August 1st, our first meeting in August would be our drop dead date unless we schedule a special meeting.
Yeah.
It would be, it's 81 days prior to November 2nd.
Okay,
I
I
just want
wasn't
to make
sure
sure that
about
we're
going.
all fully aware of the timeline, that a decision has to be made, so that we have adequate time to discuss it as a board, but also perhaps talk to some of our citizens to get their input on some of this.
Mr. Chriscoe.
There's one other thing that concerns me about doing this year, and that's the state of the economy. I mean, we're another hiccup away from something major going on. So if it would be, if we get the information that we want, we really think this is a good idea, I would not be opposed to scheduling a meeting, a special meeting to have this, to just make sure we wait to the last possible minute before we put ourselves in more stress with everything else that's going on that we can't control.
Mr. Hedrick.
I spent some time thinking along the same lines as Mr. Chriscoe about what the future looks like, and I have those same concerns.
All right. All right. We'll move.
One other thing.
Mr. Chriscoe.
If there's any other questions that we come up with, we should get them to Ms. Steele as soon as we can so that we can get those answers back sooner than later.
And it's possible that maybe the state might pass a budget.
You won't see a budget passed until after the primaries are held. There's no chance.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you all very much. That's really helpful.
Next item is the resolution to request traffic safety improvements to Woods Crossroads intersection. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I may, before I get to that, I just wanted to let these fine folks from Riverwatch know that we've already addressed the issue, and there's going to be a public notice and a vote at our next meeting regarding the golf carts. So, yeah. So you're free to leave. You're welcome to stay if you'd like. That's okay. Let me find it here. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you all know, at our last meeting, we had a very thorough discussion about the Woods Crossroads intersection at 17 to discuss smart scale funding of a possible R cut at that intersection. And after much input from the public, overwhelming input that they were opposed to that. The board rejected the smart scale funding for the R-Cut. As a result, the chair asked me to attend as a guest the Transportation Planning Advisory Committee last week as a guest, since Woods Crossroad is in the Petsworth district, and we had a very good discussion about the status of the intersection. As we were reminded, the intersection, based on federal guidelines, does not warrant a traffic signal at the present time. There's not sufficient traffic at the intersection. We're not even close under the federal guidelines. So a traffic signal, unfortunately, is not going to happen anytime soon, even if we as a county decided we wanted to pay for it. If it doesn't meet those guidelines, we still can't get a traffic signal. So looking at some alternatives, the Transportation Planning Advisory Committee, TPAC, after that discussion, unanimously voted to express its intent to make some suggestions to VDOT, with the understanding VDOT has the ultimate authority about these safety suggestions. But there were 4 that were made, and in consultation with the chair and myself. And so there is a resolution on page 67, and the 4 recommendations would be that VDOT complete a speed study at that general location to determine if a lower speed limit would be appropriate. Secondly, that there would be a recommendation that there would be a reduced speed limit to 45 miles per hour, with the understanding VDOT would have to make a determination of the start and end point of that reduction. It's my understanding from VDOT, the likelihood is if there's any reduction, it's going to be down to 55 because they want good traffic flow in the event that there's an evacuation on 17. The third recommendation was an installation of actuated flashing yellow lights when traffic enters the intersection. And then lastly, you may have seen these signs where there's a speed limit sign, but then there's radar showing you how fast you are going. So it's a deterrent, and it advises driver, hey, you're going 75 in a 55, you need to slow down. So those are recommendations, and the committee urged us to bring this before the board in the form of a resolution, and I appreciate Ms. Cronin and Mr. Wilmot putting this together pretty quickly after Wednesday's meeting. And so as a member of the Petsworth district, I certainly support it, but I open it up for your discussion.
Mr. Gibson, they struck out number 1. It says no need on my package. Did they strike that out on yours? I got mine on.
I didn't have that.
I'm sorry. That's my scribble. Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, that's my scribble.
Threw me for a loop.
No, that's okay. I retract.
Would anyone like to make the motion?
Well, I didn't know if there was any discussion.
Hold on, excuse me, Mr. Hedrick.
Yeah. I'm certainly in favor of any kinds of safety things that we can put in place to help Woods Crossroads. But I have a little written thing that I did that I just want to read. I cannot support this resolution, not because of the safety aspects of it, but as it's written, because we have no data that the solutions in this resolution will improve safety. I believe there is a better way to approach these safety issues with VDOT. I would prefer that the BOS simply request that VDOT study and implement all safety measures that their professional engineering analysis show are required in order to reduce accidents and injuries. Since I'm not a traffic engineer, I don't believe that we have traffic engineering expertise on the BOS. It makes sense to me to request that VDOT study the intersection and determine all safety measures needed based on their professional analysis. We should also understand that VDOT also has a fiduciary responsibility, just as we have, to use the taxpayer funds efficiently and effectively. I just felt that after the last go-around that we sort of gave our VDOT representative a real beating, and not us, but we all know what happened. But I still have a lot of respect for their engineering staff, and I don't want to, I would rather they come forward and make the suggestions as to what we should do at the intersection. and then we could pass a resolution. Thank you.
Any, Ms. Steele?
If I could just add one more comment, because I contacted Mr. McKnight about the grass at the intersection, so I just wanted to, because it was a question / information. I came through there and I could not see the cars. I could only see the tops of the cars, and I couldn't tell whether to pull out or not when I was in my car because the grass is so tall. And he said that the contract has been issued, so the grass should be cut very soon, because it was bad. And the other thing I wondered, because even if the grass had been tall like it is, and that mound was removed on the north side, it seems like it would be better. So I just was curious whether that came up as an additional request to ask VDOT to remove the mound on the north side like they did on the south side.
Mr. Hutson, I don't know if you recall, I believe Ron Peaks mentioned that they were going to take a look at that other side, but we didn't have enough information to include this in this recommendation. And I appreciate your comments, Mr. Hedrick. I certainly don't want to usurp the authority of VDOT. They're the engineers. We're not. However, this was some discussion at the meeting that these could be some viable safety options, and Mr. Peak seemed to be open, if they were warranted, to implementing these safety tools.
Mr. Bazzani?
So I am in agreement with Mr. Gibson's agreement with the resolution. We're dealing with bureaucrats at VDOT, and we know how bureaucrats operate. They probably already know what, that's why I scribbled on here, no need for the speed study, but I think they do need to do it again if they don't have any recent data, empirical data that shows what the speed study should be. But these are it's trying to put a square peg in a round hole in terms of rationality, and it seems reasonable to me that VDOT can, while they're studying and thinking and doing what they have to do, they can put all of these things that we suggest in this resolution until such time they decide, hey, let's do this. Now, the outcome of their study was, well, we studied it and we want to put the R cut in. And there you go. We're back to round robin again. We're back to the loop decision-making process. And so they may say, we don't want to put a stoplight there. We don't want to put traffic reduction. I don't see Wood Crossroad as a traffic congested area. Does everybody agree? I mean, I don't see that as being it is a dangerous intersection, but it's not a congested. I mean, do you travel there all the time? I don't know.
I do go through there. I think, unfortunately, that is the problem, that it's so dangerous, but yet it's not an extremely congested area, and so it doesn't have the traffic count that would warrant the signal under the federal guidelines. Which.
But you're right.
Yeah.
But that's federal guidelines, right? They don't live down here. They don't live and they watch one person get killed at Woods Crossroads. So they don't know that. They just put a square peg in a round hole. So I say, gentlemen, that we take the resolution and see what happens with VDOT.
So I move the adoption of the resolution on page 67.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
No.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item on the agenda for tonight is supervisor discussion.
Just want to make one quick comment, because I didn't get to you before we made that vote. But as far as, the safety measures, full support, as my vote indicated here, for what Mr. Gibson brought to us this evening. We talk about responsibility. Right now, VDOT has their engineers are in their safety. They're in their the R-cut is their safety mechanism du jour, because when we first got on the board, it was a roundabout. Everywhere there was a crossway intersection, there was a 2-lane highway, they put a roundabout in. You go through New Kent, there's probably 13 of them before you get back to a major highway. The R-cut would always be their answer at that situation, and the problem is it costs more money than something else. They have no problem doing a smart scale to turn around, do it again, and spend money to burn money to spend money. We've seen it evident, but I think this is the best solution that we as a board can present to these people, and I want to thank Mr. Gibson for bringing this to us.
Mr. Chair, one more comment. So, Carol and I attend the HR TPO meetings on a monthly, we're going this Thursday, there's another meeting this Thursday. You should see the projects they approve over there. Some of them don't make sense to me. And they're spending billions of dollars, but they're spending it. And we're just a gnat on an elephant's rear end in that meeting. So, but you look at the smart, I don't know, it seems like an oxymoron to call it smart scale, because I don't see how, I bet you any one of those bureaucrats that came down and looked at Woods Crossroad from smart scale, I bet you they never once came down to see that intersection in play, to see what the dynamics are going on down there. I don't, but they pat each other on the back, it's smart scale, and we're doing the right thing for the citizens. And so I think we did the right thing here tonight, gentlemen.
Mr. Hedrick.
Well, I knew it was going to pass. I mean, my whole point is that there was another way to write this resolution. And I just thought a more open dialogue with VDOT could be beneficial at this time. I hope that the outcome of the RCUT doesn't cause us problems and, with our relationship. Likewise, many people look at us as bureaucrats. I don't see myself as a bureaucrat, but we could very well be seen that way. Thank you.
For the general public, Ms. Steele and myself met with, and Ms. Rizzio for a little while, with VDOT the Thursday after the vote.
Right.
It was last Thursday. No, Thursday before last now. And to talk about the future, the desire from the county that they just don't want the light. I mean, they want the light, they don't want the RCUT. And just to show them, tell them what was going on, what we were thinking, where everything was. I think it went pretty well. We'll wait and see. But we did have a follow-up meeting with them. So, next item on the agenda is closed meeting. Potential disposition of an interest in real property identified as tax map number 45-523A and tax map number 45-526, former county garage on Route 17, and personal matters, specifically an evaluation of the county administrator. Mr. Wilmot, would you read us into closed session?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors desires to discuss particular subjects in closed meeting during the course of its meeting of May 16, 2023. And whereas the nature of the subjects is potential disposition of an interest in real property identified as tax map number 45523A RPC 12425 and tax map 45-526 RPC 19689, formerly county garage on Route 17 pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3, and personnel matters pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, specifically the evaluation of the county administrator. Now therefore be it resolved that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors is hereby convened in closed meeting for the purposes herein expressed pursuant to the legal authority herein recited.
So moved.
Ms. Steele, you poll the board.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
We're in closed session. Next item is Mr. Wilmot, would you read us back into open session?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors has completed its discussion in closed meeting and now desires to continue its open meeting. And whereas only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting. And the only subjects heard, discussed, or considered in said closed meeting were the matters identified in the resolution by which it was convened. Now therefore be it resolved that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors does hereby reconvene an open meeting at its meeting of May 16, 2023, and certifies the matters set forth in Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712D.
Ms. Thiel, would you poll the board?
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson? Yes. Dr. Orth? Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
There was something I had to say here, but I don't remember what it was. That's it.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion adjourned.